Marry me for one day. Just 24 hours. Her voice was a fragile whisper, but in the suffocating silence of the royal ballroom, it sounded like a scream. Alice Corrin's hands trembled as she pressed them flat against the cold, battle-scarred leather of the Alpha King's chest. Behind her, the entire court held its breath. Only 10 paces away, Lord Garrick, the polished monster who had turned her life into a 2-year nightmare, froze in his tracks. The ink on their forced betrothal contract was barely dry. If Garrick's hand touched her tonight, she would belong to him. There would be no escape. So, Alice did the unthinkable. She ran. She threw herself into the path of Caldwell, the ruthless Lycan King of the Northern Reaches, a terrifying warlord rumored to slaughter human armies without a second thought. "Claim me," Alice breathed, looking up into his piercing amber eyes. "And I will give you my family's eastern trading routes. Please, save me from him." She closed her eyes, bracing for rejection. She waited for him to shove her aside, waiting for the cruel laughter of the nobility. Instead, a low, guttural rumble vibrated through Caldwell's massive chest. It wasn't a threat. It was a purr. The moment her trembling hands had touched his armor, his inner beast had gone completely still. Caldwell didn't care about her human trading routes. His wolf had just found its mate. Caldwell's massive, calloused arm wrapped tightly around her waist, pulling her flush against his towering frame. His gaze shifted over her shoulder, locking onto Garrick with a lethal, terrifying promise. "Forever sounds better, little bird." Caldwell's raspy baritone echoed off the vaulted ceilings. Alice thought she was trading her family's wealth for a single day of protection. She never expected the true beast of the North to claim her for eternity, or that the dormant blood in her own veins was about to wake up and bring both their kingdoms to their knees. The cold of Frostholme did not just bite the skin, it sank into the bones. Elara stood in the center of the great hall, her fragile frame wrapped tightly in a worn gray cloak. Beneath her leather boots, the floor was a seamless expanse of black stone and ancient ice. Blue torches flickered along the towering pillars, casting long, menacing shadows across the room. 2 heavily armored Lycan guards stood behind her. When she had hesitated at the massive iron doors, one of them had roughly grabbed her arm, leaving a dull, aching bruise blossoming on her delicate wrist. She did not cry out. She simply pulled her arm away, her emerald eyes cold, and walked forward. Waiting for her at the end of the hall was the nightmare of the Northern Reaches. King Cailan. He sat upon a throne of jagged ice, a mountain of battle-scarred authority draped in black wolf fur and silver-studded leather. His silver-white hair was swept back from a chiseled, aristocratic face that showed no emotion. But his eyes, icy, piercing blue, were locked onto her. Between them sat a heavy table, carved from solid obsidian. On it lay a piece of parchment. The contract. "You are trembling, human." Cailan's voice broke the silence. It was a deep, gravelly baritone that seemed to vibrate through the stone floor and straight into Elara's chest. "I am cold, Your Majesty," Elara replied, her voice remarkably steady despite the chaotic hammering of her heart. "I am not afraid." She stepped up to the table. Beneath her gray cloak, her hand instinctively pressed against her chest, feeling the cold silver of the half-moon locket hidden beneath her dress. It was the only thing her mother had left her. It gave her courage. "The terms are written," Cailan said, standing up. He descended the steps of the throne. He was terrifyingly tall, his broad shoulders blocking out the light of them. "He torches." As he approached, the freezing air of the hall was suddenly replaced by the suffocating, scorching heat of an apex predator. 365 days, Elara said, looking up, refusing to let her gaze drop to the floor. I become your contracted bride. Your pack gains my family's remaining border territories. You clear my brother's blood debt. And in exactly 1 year, this marriage ends. I walk away. No physical claiming, no pack rituals. Kalen stopped just inches from her. He stared down at her heart-shaped face, his jaw clenching tight. He didn't smell anything special about her. Her stepmother had made sure of that, bathing Elara in witch's ash since childhood to seal away any trace of her true lineage. To Kalen's human senses, she smelled only of winter wind and cheap soap. But inside his chest, his wolf was tearing itself apart. The massive snow wolf, a beast that had remained dormant and cold for decades, was suddenly slamming against his ribs. It was roaring. It was pacing. It was demanding that Kalen fall to his knees and bare his throat to this fragile, shivering human girl. Kalen forced his hands to remain at his sides, his knuckles turning white. He was a king of logic and law. He did not understand why his beast was reacting to a scentless human, but he refused to let a momentary lapse in control dictate his rule. You are very eager to leave a kingdom you have not yet lived in, Elara, Kalen murmured, his voice dangerously soft. I am eager to not be a piece of property, she corrected him smoothly. Our marriage ends with a contract. Kalen's lips curled into a faint, predatory smirk. Sign it.
Thank you.
Elara picked up the heavy quill, dipped it in the crimson ink, and signed her name. Kalen stepped forward. He did not take the quill. Instead, he pressed his heavy silver ring, forged in the shape of a wolf swallowing the moon, into the hot black wax beside her name. The seal was struck. The bond was legal. Hours later, the heavy iron doors of the royal bedchamber slammed shut, plunging the room into a tense, suffocating silence. A massive hearth roared with fire against the far wall, warming the frozen stones. This was their wedding night. In name only. Kalen stood by the window, his broad back turned to her, staring out at the blizzard. Take the bed. I will sleep on the couch, he commanded, his tone as distant as the frozen peaks outside. Thank you, Your Majesty, Elara whispered. She turned away, grateful for the warmth of the fire. Her fingers were numb as she unclasped the heavy gray cloak from her shoulders. The fabric slipped down her arms and fell to the floor, revealing her thin linen nightgown, and exposing the dark, ugly bruise spreading across her fragile wrist. Kalen turned around at the sound of the cloak falling. His icy blue eyes immediately caught the dark purple mark marring her pale skin. In a fraction of a second, the cold, detached king was gone. A low, guttural growl ripped through Kalen's chest, a sound so primal and violent that Elara gasped, stepping back. His icy blue eyes flashed into a terrifying luminous gold. The floorboards creaked as Kalen closed the distance between them in two massive, predatory strides. The memory of the previous night still burned in Elara's mind. When Kalen's eyes had flashed that terrifying, unnatural gold, she thought he was going to tear her apart. Instead, the massive Alpha King had stopped mere inches from her. His large, calloused hands had gently taken her bruised wrist. He hadn't spoken a word. He had simply rubbed a cooling, mint-scented salve over her skin, his chest heaving as if fighting an invisible war. Then, he had abruptly turned and walked out into the blizzard, leaving her alone with the roaring fire. Now, morning had arrived, bringing with it a far colder reality. Elara was escorted into the ice court by 2 silent guards. The grand chamber was packed with the nobility of Frostholme. They wore thick furs and heavy silks, their eyes sharp and judging as they stared at the fragile human walking down the center aisle. Whispers hissed through the hall like venomous snakes. At the end of the aisle, standing beside the empty ice throne, was the Queen Mother. She was a striking, severe woman with hair the color of fresh snowfall and a gaze that could freeze water. Beside her stood Lady Vespera, the daughter of the most powerful Lycan general. Vespera was clad in an extravagant gown of silver and midnight blue, radiating the arrogant entitlement of a woman who believed the throne was already hers. "So, this is the desperate little transaction," Vespera sneered as Elara came to a halt. The false Luna descended the ice steps, circling Elara slowly, her nose wrinkling in open disgust. "No scent, no strength, just a fragile human toy bought with a handful of border territories." The court erupted into low, mocking laughter. Elara stood perfectly still. Beneath her gray cloak, her fingers pressed against her chest, feeling the solid shape of the half-moon locket. She took a slow, measured breath. She had survived a lifetime of cruelty from her stepmother. She would not let these wolves break her. "I am not a toy, Lady Vespera," Elara said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried a steady, unyielding clarity that echoed through the vast stone chamber. "I am a contracted partner to the Crown of Frostholme, signed and sealed by your king." Vespera stopped pacing. Her icy blue eyes narrowed into dangerous slits. For a human to speak back to a high-ranking Lycan was a direct insult to the pack's hierarchy. "A piece of paper does not make you a queen, human." The Queen Mother spoke from the dais, her voice dripping with absolute authority. "You are here to settle a debt. When the year is over, you will be discarded like the trash you are. Kneel before your betters and learn your place." The pressure in the room shifted. The Lycan nobles bared their teeth, their collective auras pressing down on Elara like a physical weight, trying to force her to submit. Her knees trembled against the freezing black stone. Her lungs burned. It would be so easy to drop to the floor and surrender. But Elara locked her joints. She lifted her chin, staring directly into the Queen Mother's eyes. "My contract binds me to the king," Elara stated, her voice quiet but entirely unbroken. "I kneel to no one else." A shocked gasp rippled through the nobility. Vespera's beautiful face twisted into an ugly snarl of pure rage. "You insolent little rat!" she hissed, stepping into Elara's space and raising her hand high, aiming a vicious slap meant to send the human girl crashing to the frozen floor. Elara didn't flinch. She braced for the impact. But the blow never landed. Suddenly, the blue torches lining the pillars flickered and died, plunging the edges of the hall into darkness. The temperature in the room plummeted so violently that frost instantly crystallized across the stone floor. A suffocating, terrifying, killing intent slammed into the chamber. It was an alpha's aura, pure, lethal, and unrestrained. The heavy atmosphere didn't just demand respect. It demanded absolute submission. Around Elara, the arrogant Lycan nobility began to collapse. Knees slammed into the hard stone, heads bowed instantly. Even the Queen Mother grabbed the arm of the throne to steady herself, her face paling. Vespera was forced down, her raised hand dropping as she fell to both knees, trembling uncontrollably under the crushing weight of her alpha's fury. Strangely, Elara felt none of the crushing pressure. To her, The heavy air felt like a protective shield, warm and unyielding. Footsteps echoed from the heavy iron doors, slow, deliberate. King Kaelin walked down the center aisle. He was dressed in full royal armor, his silver-white hair catching the faint light. His eyes were not their usual icy blue. They were glowing with a feral, brilliant amber. He didn't look at the Queen Mother. He didn't look at the hundreds of kneeling wolves. His lethal gaze was fixed entirely on Vespera, who was cowering at Elara's feet. The silence in the ice court was absolute. The only sound was the heavy, rhythmic thud of the Alpha King's boots against the black stone as he closed the distance to the throne. Lady Vespera was shaking so violently that the jewels on her gown rattled. She remained on her knees, her head bowed in forced submission, unable to look up against the crushing weight of Kaelin's aura. Kaelin stopped right beside Elara. The terrifying, feral amber light in his eyes didn't fade as he looked down at the trembling Lycan noblewoman. "Explain yourself, Vespera," Kaelin commanded. Did. His voice was not a shout, but a low, vibrating growl that promised devastation. "My king," Vespera stammered, her arrogant facade entirely shattered. The human disrespected the Queen Mother. She refused to kneel. I was merely teaching her the proper respect owed to our kind." "Did I give you permission to touch what is mine?" Kaelin interrupted, his words slicing through the freezing air like a sharpened blade. Vespera flinched, as if she had been physically struck. "She's just a contracted human, a bot." "She bears the royal seal of Frostholme." Kaelin's voice finally boomed, echoing off the vaulted ceilings and sending a fresh wave of terror through the kneeling nobility. "The ink on her contract is my decree. To strike her is to strike the crown. To humiliate her is to humiliate your king." The Queen Mother, still gripping the armrest of the throne, pale but defiant, spoke up. "Kaelin, you overstep. Vespera is the daughter of your finest general. You would shame a highborn Lycan for a fragile mortal who leaves in a year." Kaelin finally shifted his glowing eyes to his mother. The temperature in the room seemed to drop another 10 degrees. "The law of this pack is absolute, Mother. And I am the law." He turned his attention back to Vespera. "For raising your hand against a ward of the crown, you will kneel in the outer courtyard. 3 days and 3 nights in the snow, without a cloak." A collective gasp echoed from the bowing nobles, but no one dared to protest. 3 days in the freezing storms of Frostholme would break her pride and humiliate her before the entire city. It was a brutal, non-violent, and perfectly legal destruction of her arrogance. "Guards, take her," Kaelin ordered. As the guards dragged a weeping Vespera away, Kaelin's crushing alpha aura suddenly evaporated from the room. The blue torches flared back to life. The court breathed a collective, ragged sigh of relief. Kaelin turned to Elara. The feral amber in his eyes slowly receded, leaving behind the icy, piercing blue she had seen the night before. He didn't ask if she was all right. He didn't offer sweet, meaningless words. He simply held out his massive, gauntleted hand. Elara stared at it. Her heart was beating frantically against her ribs, right where the silver locket lay hidden. For a moment, the cruel, isolated world she had known for 2 years vanished, replaced by the towering, protective presence of this terrifying king. "It is just the contract," Elara reminded herself fiercely, swallowing the sudden lump in her throat. "He is protecting his property, not a wife." With a steady breath, She placed her small, trembling hand into his. His fingers closed around hers, warm, solid, and overwhelmingly safe. Kaelin led her out of the great hall, leaving the stunned court behind. They walked in silence through the long, echoing corridors toward the eastern wing. Once they were completely alone in the shadowed stone hallway, Kaelin abruptly stopped. He turned to her, his brow furrowed in a tight frown. He looked down at the hand he was holding, specifically at the wrist where the guard had bruised her the night before. "Did she touch you?" Kaelin asked, his voice rough. "No," Elara said softly. "You stopped her." Kaelin shifted his grip, his bare thumb brushing gently against her pulse point to check for any new injuries. The moment his skin slid against hers, something impossible happened. Beneath Elara's gray cloak, the ancient silver half-moon locket pulsed. A faint, ethereal blue light briefly bled through the fabric of her dress, unseen by Kaelin, but felt as a sudden rush of heat against her chest. At that exact second, Kaelin flinched, dropping her hand as a sharp, blinding pain pierced his temple. He staggered back half a step, his hand flying to his forehead. The witch's ash seal that had hidden Elara's true lineage for 22 years cracked. It was only a hairline fracture, a microscopic tear in the magic, but to the Alpha King, it was like a bomb going off. For one single fleeting second, the scent of cheap soap vanished. Instead, Kaelin's senses were flooded with a scent so intoxicating, so breathtakingly perfect, that it punched the air out of his lungs. Midnight snow, silver pine, and the sweet, primal metallic tang of royal blood. Ah, mate. The word echoed in Kaelin's mind, roaring from the deepest, most feral depths of his wolf. The beast inside him slammed against its mental cage, demanding he pull her into his arms and never let her go. Kaelin stared at Elara, his chest heaving, his icy eyes wide with absolute shock. The fleeting scent of midnight snow and silver pine vanished almost as quickly as it had appeared. The microscopic crack in the witch's ash seal closed, trapping Elara's true lineage in darkness once more. To Kaelin's human senses, she smelled like cheap soap again. But the damage was done. Inside his chest, his wolf had stopped pacing. It was now sitting at attention, completely focused on the fragile human girl standing before him. "She is ours," the beast purred. Kaelin swallowed hard, his icy blue eyes staring intently at Elara's pale, confused face. He forced his mind to calculate, to suppress the feral urge to claim her right there in the stone corridor. "Come with me," Kaelin said, his voice entirely stripped of its usual harsh command. He didn't take her to the dungeons, nor back to the suffocating ice court. Instead, he led her deep into the eastern wing, stopping before a pair of towering mahogany doors carved with ancient runes. He pushed them open, guiding her into the royal forbidden library. It was a stark contrast to the rest of Frostholme. Here, there was no ice. A colossal stone hearth dominated the room, roaring with a massive fire that bathed the endless shelves of leather-bound books in a warm, golden glue. "Ow!" "Sit." Kaelin gestured toward a plush velvet chair near the fire. Elara hesitated, wrapping her gray cloak tighter around her shoulders before sinking into the soft cushions. The heat immediately began to chase away the deep chill in her bones. She watched cautiously as Kaelin walked to a wooden side table, poured a goblet of spiced winter wine, and handed it to her. "Drink," he ordered softly. "It will warm your blood." Elara took a small sip, the rich spices blooming in her chest. Kaelin did not sit. He stood by the roaring fire, the flames casting dancing shadows across his silver-white hair and broad shoulders. He studied her with a terrifying intensity. "Tell me about your upbringing, Elara," Kaelin said abruptly. "Your stepmother. How did she treat you?" Elara blinked, taken aback by the personal question. She reminded me of my place," she answered carefully, staring down at her goblet. "I was a burden, a debt to be paid. That is why I was sold to your kingdom to balance the letters." Kaelin's jaw tightened. "And your daily routines? What herbs did she make you bathe in?" Elara looked up, genuinely confused. "How did you know about that?" She claimed I carried a sickness, a foulness from my birth mother. Since I was a child, she forced me to wash in a special gray ash. She said it was the only way to keep me clean. Kaelin's eyes darkened into a dangerous, stormy blue. "Witch's ash," he thought, his blood running cold. It was not a cleansing ritual. It was a sensory prison. Her stepmother hadn't been cleaning her. She had been suppressing her, hiding her from the supernatural world, hiding her from him. "It seems your stepmother was a very thorough liar," Kaelin murmured, his voice dripping with venom meant entirely for the human woman who had tormented his mate. Elara stood up, feeling a sudden restless energy. She walked toward Kaelin's massive oak desk, trying to process his words. Lying open on the desk was an ancient, crumbling parchment filled with glowing, jagged symbols. Without thinking, Elara ran her fingers over the edge of the parchment. "The blood of the moon bows to no winter," Elara read aloud, her voice soft in the quiet room. The silence that followed was absolute. Kaelin froze. The wine glass in his hand nearly snapped under the sudden pressure of his grip. He turned to her slowly, his massive frame completely rigid. "What did you just say?" Kaelin whispered. Elara looked up, slightly alarmed by his intense reaction. I just read the text. The blood of the moon bows to no..." "That is high Lycan, Elara," Kaelin interrupted, stepping toward her, his boots making no sound on the thick rugs. "It is an ancient runic language. Humans do not have the magical affinity to even see the ink on that page, let alone possess the vocal cords to pronounce the word." Elara stepped back, her heart hammering against the silver locket hidden beneath her dress. "That's impossible. It looks like ordinary script to me." Kaelin didn't stop until he was standing right in front of her. His towering presence swallowed her entirely. He looked down into her emerald eyes, searching for the truth he now knew was buried inside her. "You are not a simple human bride," Kaelin rumbled, his voice dropping to a dangerously intimate whisper. He slowly reached out, his large, warm fingers brushed against her collarbone, tracing the delicate silver chain that disappeared beneath her neckline. The touch sent a violent, electric shock straight down Elara's spine. "What are you hiding under here, little bird?" Kaelin asked, his thumb hooking the chain. Before Elara could answer, before she could pull away or surrender to the hypnotic pull of his glowing eyes, a deafening sound shattered the intimate silence. The heavy iron war bells of the citadel began to toll. 3 sharp, frantic rings. Kaelin's hand dropped from her chain. His gaze snapped toward the door, the Alpha King instantly replacing the mate. The Queen Mother had made her move. The tolling of the iron war bells shattered the fleeting warmth of the library. Kaelin's expression hardened instantly into the cold, ruthless mask of the Lycan King. He did not say another word about the High Lycan script or the Sylve. copper locket. He simply grabbed his heavy fur cloak, threw it over his broad shoulders, and motioned for Elara to follow. "Stay close to me," Kaelin commanded, his voice tight. "Do not speak unless I tell you to." They moved swiftly through the stone corridors, the sounds of shouting and marching boots echoing from the lower levels. When Kaelin pushed open the massive iron doors of the great hall, the chamber was already packed with armed guards and frantic nobility. Standing on the dais, right beside the ice throne, was the Queen Mother. Lady Vespera stood a few paces behind her, wrapped in thick furs, a smug, triumphant smile playing on her lips. At the base of the throne knelt a human servant, trembling violently. Beside him, placed carefully on a velvet pillow, was a silver goblet crusted with a strange, glittering gray powder. "What is the meaning of this?" Shouting Kaelin's voice boomed over the chaos, instantly silencing the room. The Queen Mother looked down at him, her face a mask of false grief. "Treason, my king. A plot against your very life, orchestrated by the creature you brought into our home." Gasps. Elara's heart stopped. She looked at the goblet, then at the servant. "Speak, wretch," the Queen Mother ordered the kneeling man. The servant pressed his forehead to the frozen stone. "It was the human bride, your majesty," he sobbed, pointing a shaking finger directly at Elara. "She paid me to dust your evening chalice with weaponized silver. She said if you died, the contract would be void, and she could take the treasury gold and return to the south." Murmurs of absolute outrage erupted from the Lycan nobility. Weaponized silver was a death sentence for their kind. To introduce it into the royal keep was an act of war. "She is a murderer," Vespera hissed, stepping forward. "She used the contract to get close enough to strike." Sighs. Elara felt the blood drain from her face, but she forced her spine to straighten. She did not cower. "That is a lie," Elara said, her voice cutting clearly through the hostile murmurs. "I have never seen that man in my life, and I have been in the Forbidden Library with the king since the morning court ended." Shouting. "You gave the order before you went to the library, you treacherous rat," Vespera shouted back. "Silence!" Kaelin roared. The hall instantly fell quiet, but the tension was thick enough to choke on. Sighs. Kaelin looked at the silver-dusted goblet. He knew it was a lie. He knew exactly what Elara smelled like. There was no trace of silver, no scent of fear or deceit on her. He knew his mother had orchestrated this to force his hand and legally execute the human she despised. "The law of Frostholme is absolute, Kaelin," the Queen Mother said, her voice ringing with deadly finality. "Any creature who conspires to poison the Alpha is stripped of all protections. The contract is broken by treason. The penalty is immediate execution." Pause. She raised her hand. "Royal Guard, seize the human." A dozen heavily armored Lycan guards stepped forward, their silver-tipped spears lowering as they advanced on Elara. Elara's breath hitched. Gasps. She took a step back, her hand flying to her chest, gripping the locket hidden beneath her dress. The crushing reality of the trap closed in on her. Garrick had used contracts to imprison her, but the Queen Mother was using the law to kill her. But as the guards closed in, the metallic ring of steel sliding from its scabbard echoed like a thunderclap. Kaelin drew his massive broadsword. The entire court gasped, stepping back in unison. Surprised, they expected the Alpha King to execute the traitor himself. They expected him to bring the heavy, lethally sharp blade down upon the fragile human girl. Instead, Kaelin took a long stride to the side. He planted his boots firmly on the black stone, his towering armored body stepping directly in front of Elara, completely shielding her from the court. He raised his broadsword, pointing the gleaming steel straight at the chest of his own royal guard captain. "Take one more step," Kaelin growled, the feral amber light exploding in his eyes, "and I will show you why I am the king." The guards froze in pure terror. "Kaelin!" the Queen Mother shrieked, losing her aristocratic composure. Angry. "Are you mad? You would draw steel on your own pack for a human assassin? The law demands her blood." "The law demands proof, Mother," Kaelin snarled, his broad back an impenetrable wall of protection for the trembling girl behind him. "And until I have it, she is my contracted bride. She is mine. Touch her, and I will execute every wolf in this hall." The standoff in the Great Hall was a razor's edge away from a bloodbath. Kaelin stood immovable, his broadsword gleaming in the torchlight. The royal guard hesitated, their loyalty to the Alpha King warring with the ancient pack laws the Queen Mother was invoking. "You would burn your own kingdom to the ground for her?" the Queen Mother demanded, her voice trembling with a mixture of fury and disbelief. "The law is clear, Kaelin. If you shield a traitor, you forfeit your right to the throne." "Then let the throne burn," Kaelin snarled, his grip on his sword tightening. Elara stared at his broad back, her breath catching in her throat. He was throwing away everything, his crown, his pack, his life, all for a human bride he had known for less than 2 days. The contract meant nothing now. This was a man protecting his own. From the shadows of the pillars, the High Elder stepped forward, his face deeply lined with age. "There is another way, my king," the Elder rasped, leaning heavily on his staff. "If the Alpha claims the accused is innocent, he may invoke the trial by frost. As the holder of her contract, you may take her burden, but you must endure the silvered storm to buy her a day of investigation." Vespera let out a sharp, cruel laugh. "You cannot be serious. You would let the king breathe weaponized silver for this mortal trash?" "I accept," Kaelin said without a second of hesitation. He smoothly sheathed his broadsword. The feral amber in his eyes glowed with fierce, unyielding resolve. "No," Elara whispered, finally stepping out from behind him, her hands trembling as she grabbed his heavy leather sleeve. "Kaelin, no. Silver kills Lycans. You can't do this for me." Kaelin looked down at her. The icy, terrifying warlord softened for just a fraction of a second. He reached up, his large hand gently brushing a stray lock of chestnut hair away from her pale face. "You are my contracted bride, little bird. I said I would protect you. I do not break my word." He turned his back on her and stepped into the center of the hall, standing directly over the royal crest carved into the black stone. The Queen Mother's eyes narrowed into slits of pure malice. If her son was foolish enough to die for a human, she would take the throne herself. She snatched the poisoned goblet from the velvet pillow and hurled it against the ground at Kaelin's feet. The goblet shattered. The weaponized silver powder exploded upward, carried by a sudden, unnatural gust of freezing wind summoned by the court's elders. A shimmering, deadly gray mist engulfed the Alpha King. The moment the silver touched Kaelin's skin, it burned like acid. A low, agonized grunt escaped his lips, but he refused to scream. He locked his jaw, his massive muscles straining as the toxic dust seared through his armor and into his lungs. He fell to one knee, the black stone cracking beneath the force of his descent. "Kaelin!" Elara screamed, her voice tearing through this. Silent hall. Tears, hot and desperate, finally spilled down her cheeks. For 2 years under Garrick's cruelty, she had never cried. But watching this terrifying, magnificent king willingly endure torture for her broke every defense she had left. Inside the silver mist, Kaelin staggered, his silver-white hair stained with ash. He coughed, a violent spasm that sent a splatter of dark blood onto the ice-cold floor. His wolf was fighting desperately to heal the damage, but the concentrated silver was too strong. Vespera stepped forward, a silver dagger slipping from her sleeve. The Queen Mother watched with cold satisfaction. The king was weak. The pack law would allow them to strike down the human now, and if the Alpha died defending her, it was his own fault. "The king falls!" Vespera shouted to the guards. "Seize the human and end this!" 2 guards lunged toward Elara, but Elara Corrin was done hiding behind the king. She was done being the fragile human everyone thought she was. As the guards closed the distance, Elara didn't run away. She ran forward. She tore her gray cloak from her shoulders, letting it fall to the floor, and sprinted directly into the deadly, swirling mist of weaponized silver. The silver mist should have burned her lungs. It should have dropped her to the floor in blinding agony. But as Elara tore through the toxic cloud, she felt nothing but a strange, crackling energy wrapping around her skin. The silver dust parted before her, repelled by the heavy silver locket that was now burning like a hot coal against her chest. She dropped to her knees beside Kaelin. The Alpha King was gripping his broadsword, his knuckles white, blood dripping from his chin as the weaponized silver ravaged his Lycan biology. "I told you to run, little bird," Kaelin rasped, his voice a broken rumble. He tried to push her away, to shield her with his massive body, even as he was dying. "I am not leaving you," Elara cried, grabbing his armored shoulders. Footsteps rushed toward them. Through the swirling mist, Lady Vespera charged, a silver-tipped dagger raised high. Her face was twisted into a mask of pure, ugly triumph. "Die, human!" Vespera shrieked, driving the blade down toward Elara's back. Elara turned, raising her bare hands to protect Kaelin. The sharp edge of the dagger sliced across her palm. It wasn't a deep wound, but it was enough. Bright crimson blood welled up, sliding down her wrist. A single drop fell, striking the silver half-moon locket at her collarbone. Another drop hit the ancient, frozen black stone at the base of the ice throne. Time seemed to stop. The moment Elara's blood touched the locket, the witch's ash seal, the spell that had imprisoned her true nature for 22 years, shattered completely. A sound like cracking glaciers echoed through the great hall. The locket levitated inches from Elara's chest, erupting into a blinding, ethereal blue light. The raw, kinetic lunar energy blasted outward in a massive shockwave. It hit Vespera first, throwing the false Luna 30 feet backward across the hall, her silver dagger clattering uselessly against the stone. Then, the true revelation hit the pack. The scent of cheap soap was obliterated. In its place, a scent so pure, so overwhelmingly powerful, flooded the vast chamber. Midnight snow, silver pine, the ancient, sacred scent of royal Lycan blood. Every wolf in the room froze. The Queen Mother's eyes went wide with sheer terror. The blue light washed over Kaelin. Where the ethereal glow touched his skin, the gray-silver dust dissolved into harmless ash. His burns stopped hissing. The lethal wounds across his chest knit themselves back together in seconds. Elara stood up slowly, the locket glowing like a captured star against her chest. Her chestnut hair whipped around her in an invisible wind. The bleeding cut on her palm sealed itself, leaving behind a faint, glowing silver crescent scar. Behind her, the massive throne of jagged ice began to hum. It resonated with the beating of her heart, glowing with the exact same blue light as her locket. The throne was not just reacting, it was recognizing its true master. The bloodline of the first Luna, the High Elder whispered, falling to his knees, his staff clattering to the floor. The White Queen has returned. Elara looked down at her hands, feeling the dormant, wild energy finally awake in her veins. She was not a fragile mortal. She was not a piece of property bought with border territories. She was power incarnate. Beside her, Kaelin rose to his full, towering height. The silver poison was completely gone from his system. His broadsword hung loosely in his grip, but his feral, amber eyes were locked entirely on Elara. He didn't look at the glowing throne. He didn't look at the terrified court. He only looked at his mate. Vespera. Kaelin's voice broke the stunned silence. It was a low, devastating rumble that promised no mercy. Vespera scrambled backward on the ice, her beautiful dress torn, staring in absolute horror at the glowing, untouchable woman standing beside the king. The great hall of Frostholme was dead silent. The lethal tension that had choked the room only moments before was entirely gone, replaced by a profound, trembling awe. Lady Vespera pushed herself backward across the freezing stone, her silk gown tearing, her perfectly styled hair falling in disarray. She stared up at Elara, whose skin still carried the faint, ethereal glow of the first Luna. The human she had mocked, the trash she had tried to strike, was radiating a power so ancient and pure that Vespera's own wolf whined in absolute submission. Kaelin walked slowly toward Vespera. The heavy, rhythmic thud of his armored boots was the only sound in the vast chamber. "My king," Vespera stammered, tears of sheer panic ruining her face. I was only trying to protect you, the human, she. Do not speak her name." Kaelin's voice was a low, devastating rumble that vibrated the very ice of the pillars. You conspired to murder the mate of your alpha. You brought weaponized silver into my court. You drew a blade on the White Queen. Vespera looked wildly toward the dais, seeking help. "Queen Mother, tell him! We did this for the pack!" The Queen Mother stood frozen beside the glowing ice throne. For the first time in her life, the imperious woman looked old. Her grand schemes, her manipulation of the pack laws, all of it had been burned to ash by the blue light radiating from Elara's locket. "I knew nothing of her silver," the Queen Mother lied, her voice lacking its usual commanding edge. She took a step away from the throne, unable to bear the heat of its magical resonance. Vespera acted alone. "Liar!" Vespera shrieked, betrayed. Kaelin didn't even look at his mother. He stared down at Vespera, his icy blue eyes completely devoid of mercy. He did not raise his broadsword. He did not need a weapon to destroy her. "Under the absolute law of Frostholme," Kaelin declared, his voice carrying to every corner of the silent hall, "I strip you of your noble title, Lady Vespera. Your family crest is broken. Your name is struck from the pack's history. You are exiled from these lands forever. If you are found within my borders by nightfall, the winter wolves will have you." Vespera let out a wail of pure despair, collapsing onto the stone. For a highborn Lycan, losing their pack and their title was a fate far worse than death. 2 royal guards stepped forward without needing an order, dragging the sobbing, stripped noblewoman out of the hall. Kaelin then turned slowly toward the dais. The Queen Mother stiffened, lifting her chin in a desperate attempt to retain her dignity. I am your mother, Kaelin. I am the dowager of this realm. You cannot banish me. No, Kaelin agreed, his voice frighteningly calm as he stepped onto the base of the dais. I will not banish you. I will do something far worse. I strip you of your seat on the council. You have no voice, no guards, no authority. You will remain in this keep to watch the human you despised sit upon the throne you coveted. You are nothing but a shadow in my court. The Queen Mother opened her mouth to argue, but the ice throne behind her pulsed with a bright, warning blue light. The magic of the First Luna rejected her completely. Pale and humiliated, the former queen turned and walked away, her heavy robes dragging across the stone like chains. Justice had been served. No blood flooded the floor, but the hierarchy of the kingdom had been brutally, legally restructured. Elara watched them go. The wild, kinetic energy in her blood began to settle, the blinding light of the locket softening into a steady, warm silver hum against her chest. She didn't feel the urge to glow. She simply felt whole. The fear that had dictated her life for 2 years under Garrick and the anxiety of the contract melted away. She was no longer a victim waiting for the clock to run out. From the shadows, the High Elder stepped forward, leaning heavily on his staff. He looked at Elara, then slowly, deliberately, dropped to both knees. He bowed his head so low it nearly touched the frozen stone. Forgive us, true Luna, the High Elder rasped, his voice filled with profound shame. We were blind to the moon's light. Like a wave crashing across the great hall, the rest of the Lycan nobility followed. Hundreds of powerful wolves, the very people who had laughed at her and called her a fragile toy just an hour ago, fell to their knees in absolute, undeniable submission. Elara stood above them, the undisputed Queen of the North. A heavy clatter broke the reverent silence. Kaelin had dropped his massive broadsword onto the floor. He didn't care about the kneeling court. He didn't care about the pack laws anymore. He walked down the steps of the dais, his feral amber eyes burning with an intense, overwhelming hunger, and stopped right in front of Elara. The collective submission of the Frostholme pack was a heavy, overwhelming weight in the Great Hall. Hundreds of powerful wolves, warriors who had conquered the northern reaches, kept their heads bowed to the freezing stone, not daring to meet the glowing emerald eyes of the human they had mocked. Elara looked down at the sea of bowed heads. The kinetic energy of the first Luna still hummed warmly in her veins, but she did not let the power intoxicate her. She remembered how quickly these wolves had turned on her, how easily they had followed Vespera's cruel lead. Rise! Elara's voice was calm, yet it carried an undeniable, ringing authority that reached the farthest corners of the chamber. Hesitantly, the High Elder stood up, followed slowly by the rest of the nobility. They kept their gazes respectfully lowered. You bow now to the light of the moon, Elara said, her words slicing through the absolute silence. But yesterday, you mocked the fragile human who carried it. You judge a ruler by the thickness of their fur and the sharpness of their fangs, forgetting that true strength lies in the honor of the pack. You will not respect me just because the throne glows from my blood. You will respect me because I am your queen, and I have bled for your king. A wave of profound shame washed over the nobility. No one dared to argue. The High Elder placed a hand over his heart and bowed deeply once more. "It shall be as the true Luna commands." "Leave us," Kaelin's voice suddenly boomed. It was not a request, it was an alpha command. Within moments, the great hall emptied completely. The heavy iron doors shut with a resounding thud, leaving only the crackle of the blue torches and the soft, ethereal hum of the ice throne. Elara turned, Ned to Kaelin. The terrifying warlord, who had just defied his own laws to protect her, was staring at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. The feral amber had receded from his eyes, leaving behind a piercing, burning blue that held nothing but raw, unfiltered emotion. He closed the distance between them. He didn't reach for her waist or try to pull her into a dominant embrace. Instead, his large, gauntleted hands gently reached for her right hand, the one she had used to block Vespera's silver dagger. He carefully traced the faint silver crescent scar that now marked her palm. "I swore to protect you," Kaelin murmured, his voice rough with self-reproach. "And yet, you had to bleed to save me." "You took a storm of weaponized silver for me, Kaelin," Elara whispered, her heart hammering against her ribs as the warmth of his touch traveled up her arm. "You were going to let the kingdom burn rather than hand me over." Kaelin looked up from her hand, his gaze locking onto hers. "It was never about the contract, Elara." He stepped closer, his imposing frame shielding her from the cold of the massive room. "Your stepmother's witch ash blinded my senses. To my human mind, you smelled of nothing. But my beast, my wolf, knew the moment you walked through those iron doors. When I saw that bruise on your wrist on our wedding night, my wolf wanted to tear the guard to pieces. When Vespera raised her hand to you, it took every ounce of my willpower not to execute her on the spot." Elara's breath hitched. "You said I was the property of the crown." Kaelin let out a low, bitter exhale. "I used the law to chain you to me, because I could not understand why my soul was demanding that I kneel before you. I was a fool, blinded by logic, trying to rationalize the mate bond." He raised a hand, his calloused fingers gently cupping her cheek. "I did not protect you because you were my property, little bird. I protected you because you are my heart." The confession hung in the air, heavy and beautiful. For 2 years, Elara had been treated as a pawn, a debt, a fragile thing to be broken. Now, the most feared alpha in the realm was standing before her, laying his entire soul bare. The pull of the mate bond was intoxicating. Every nerve in her body screamed for her to lean into his touch, to let him claim her completely. But Elara Corrin had fought too hard for her freedom to simply fall into a fairy tale. She gently reached up and covered his hand with hers. She offered him a soft, genuinely affectionate smile, but then she slowly pulled his hand away from her cheek and stepped back. Kaelin's eyes widened in sudden panic, his wolf whining in the back of his mind at the loss of contact. "I told you on the day I arrived, Kaelin," Elara said softly, her voice steady and resolute. "Our marriage ends with the contract." Kaelin fresh ooze. For a terrifying second, Elara thought the Alpha King would roar, that his wolf would shatter the fragile peace between them to demand its mate. Instead, Kaelin let out a slow, huffing breath. He reached inside his heavy leather armor and pulled out a folded piece of parchment. The contract. The blood-red wax of the royal seal was still perfectly intact. He walked over to the nearest blue torch. Without a single word of protest, Without a second of hesitation, he held the parchment over the open flame. Elara watched as the fire consumed the paper. The ancient runes, the royal seal, and her own signature turned into blackened ash that fluttered harmlessly onto the cold stone floor. "You are right," Kaelin said, his voice entirely calm, entirely sincere. "A contract is a transaction. It was forged in desperation and sealed in a lie. I will not have my queen bound to me by a piece of paper, nor will I hold her hostage to a fate she did not actively choose." He turned back to her. The King of Frostholme, the ruthless warlord who had just brought his entire kingdom to its knees, walked back to Elara and slowly sank to one knee before her. "You are free, Elara Corrin," Kaelin rumbled, looking up at her with eyes full of absolute, unwavering devotion. "The debt is paid. The borders are open. You may leave this fortress right now, and no wolf in my pack will ever dare to stop you." He paused, his massive chest rising and falling as he laid his entire heart bare. "But if you stay because you choose me. Not as a contracted bride, not as property, but as my equal, my partner, my true Luna." Elara stared at the ashes of her cage on the floor. For 2 years, she had fought just to survive the cruelties of men who wanted to own her, to use her, to keep her small. She had signed her life away just to buy a single year of peace. Now, the most powerful king in the world was giving her the entire kingdom and asking for nothing but her free will. The ancient kinetic hum of the first Luna in her veins settled into a warm, beautiful rhythm, syncing perfectly with the steady heartbeat of the man kneeling before her. She stepped forward, closing the final distance between them. She reached down, her small hands firmly grasping his broad, armored shoulders, and urged him to stand. As Kaelin rose to his full, towering height, Elara looked up into his fierce blue eyes and smiled. It was a genuine, radiant smile that chased away the last remnants of the Frostholme winter. "I asked for 1 year of protection, Kaelin," Elara whispered, sliding her arms around his neck, the silver moon locket resting warmly between their hearts. Kaelin's heavy arms wrapped instantly around her waist, pulling her flush against his solid frame. He buried his face in her chestnut hair, inhaling the intoxicating scent of midnight snow and silver pine that was finally, truly his. "And I told you on the first day, little bird," Kaelin rasped, his voice thick with overwhelming emotion as he leaned down to press his lips against hers. "Forever sounds much better. A crown can be stolen, and a contract can burn, but a true bond, forged in respect, cannot be broken." Do you think Elara made the right choice by testing the Alpha King's respect at the very end, before giving him her heart? If you loved this emotional journey of a contracted bride finding her worth, and a true queen rising from the cold, subscribe and join our pack. We have many more tales of protective alphas, hidden destinies, and royal justice waiting for you in the next story.